I think you can certainly learn from other Christian traditions, but our tradition is fundamentally Baptist, and I'd say especially Pietist. And that creates the second problem, which is that Pietists traditionally, I think rightly, are suspicious of overemphasizing theological systems or seeing faith solely in terms of intellectual assent to theological propositions or philosophical presuppositions. Pietists look at that and they think dead orthodoxy. They think that, well, you can say the creed, you can say the confession, you can make a systematic theological argument, but if you're not alive in Christ, it's not Christian. And some response from Pietists has been to be anti-intellectual, to say that doing any kind of secular study then will lead us away from the source of truth, and will lead us away from life in Christ and down this path of first dead orthodoxy, then secularity, unbelief totally. And Bethel hasn't gone down that path. And I think it's argued in its tradition that liberal arts education is consistent with the experience, the heartfelt experience of God, which I think is really central to Pietism. So I think it's a really hard thing to explain. I think it's something that's kind of part of the ethos of Bethel, the people who've been here for a long time, especially if they were students and then professors. I think they get it, but it's hard for them even to describe because they've been here. And it's just part of what the place is. So, as somebody who's been here now for about 7 years and I've thought some more about it, I guess I'd identify a couple of incentives. One is that if we're Pietists and we hear people talking about faith-learning integration simply in terms of intellectual systems, we ought to reject that. And that's not useful to us. Because I think the primary purpose of education at Bethel, set aside scholarship here and just talk about teaching, is that we're leading people to Christ. It's conversion to Christ, it's repentance of a life of sin, and it's then regeneration, being transformed in not just mind, but heart and body and soul. And so it's a salvific process, and that can't be something that you can just be argued into. It's not something you can write down and have a geometric argument and a proof and say, therefore I believe. It requires an encounter with the living God in Christ. And I think it's hard to describe a method for that. I think about how this shows up in the way I teach. So in the World War I class, part of what I'm doing is this kind of intellectual process of reconciling different beliefs about what is ethical, what is just, what is peace. But I think what I hope for really is not so much that they're able to make that intellectual argument, but that my students recognize their own sin in the sin that they see in something like World War I. That they see the suffering and they grieve for it just like Christ grieves for it. That they repent of where they see this in their own lives, and that ultimately somehow they find Jesus Christ in that story.
Not to shake up the history just for the sake of shaking it up, but for one, there's been so many chapters of that history that have been missing. For someone like myself who grew up invisible in the public school curriculum, I get to finally see someone like myself, my culture, my values, reflected in that story. The other thing I think is really important is that, as America is becoming a place that is, in fact, much increasingly diverse, that it is accounting for the diversity of the people who are sitting in the chairs. When I went to school, there was no one that looked like me. No one in politics looked like me. No one on television looked like me. And yet there we were. There were many students who looked like me, but nothing about the school and the curriculum had anything to do with us and our values and what our world was, our troubles, and what we could be when we grew up. So if anything else, a culturally responsive instruction needs to account for the people who are sitting in front of you, and which increasingly in our day is going to be more and more diverse, even here in the Twin Cities, from what I understand. Bethel needs to be a place that is going to have to account for that. The other thing, too, is I'm hoping that why it's important is it helps us to see each other beyond just stereotypes, beyond just stuff that we've been told, or politicians as they debate each other, or as we're on one side of an issue or another. So it's very hard to look at anything objectively. Many Americans, when they think of immigration, they think of illegal immigration. Many Americans, particularly post 9/11, when they think of Middle Easterners or Muslims, they think of terrorism, extreme Islam. So if anything, a culturally inclusive or responsive education begins to help us to see that these are humans. If nothing else, they're humans. And maybe we can get to a point where we can at least start figuring out that we're not always the heroes in the story.
This is down in Frogtown now.
Well, I'm just going to throw up here, kind of put things together. So we'll just start over here and go around the room really quickly. And first we'll do this, then this, then this. So first of all, the aspect or the type of art that you're drawn to, the most. Music. Okay. Okay. That one could be popular. So just for fun. Oh, I like to give out. Okay. All right. Okay. Next.
I'll say R&B music.
R&B. Okay. I'm sorry? Poetry. All right. Good. Dry.
This is in the Greek literature program, Gen Ed class. I think it's like their second or third class in the program.
That's great.
Fiction novels.
Okay. All right. Fiction?
Yes.
Well, we've got a wide range. Last time I did this class, it was a lot narrower. Music. Very good.
Drama.
All right. We're covering all the bases here. Now, the next step of our little warm-up exercise tonight, I'm going to have us respond to 3 different kinds of art. And these I haven't prepared before. Okay? So I would like you to take your anthology. That's a big, thick book, which is when we say anthology, we mean a book that collects a lot of smaller texts. And I would like you to look at page 255, and you'll see a brief poem called Dead Fires. Okay? And I'd like you to briefly read that poem, and then just write a sentence or two of some response, and your response, totally up to you what your response is. Okay?
I was thinking ode to a bee sting.
Ode to a bee sting.
You know how somebody's allergic?
Okay. Okay. Now, when you say that, do I sort of get the sense that, like a bee sting, we don't normally think of as super serious, but if you're allergic, it's kind of an exaggerated reaction. So are you kind of feeling like there's a reaction here which may be larger than what's behind it or something? Or?
Well, yeah, they're using balm, they're about to die. I've seen it happen before. That's why it kind of popped in my head. I've seen someone stung that was allergic, and they kind of...
Yeah. Okay.
It was weird.
Yeah. Well, that's an interesting response. Okay.
It's doing one of our grad programs now.
I promise it won't be terribly long. But it will mean that people will be using the hallway. It's not the ideal scenario. But you'll understand soon why we're doing that. Okay? So if you take notes, bring it. Otherwise, I trust that I'm going to teach you really well. You might not need notes. Okay? We're just going right outside the door. Come with me. All right. Most of us, when we went to school, we had teachers who taught using textbooks. They stood up in front and they, shared information. We read. We watched videos sometimes, right? How many of you that's been your experience with your, education? Okay. Most teachers, traditional school is taught in this category up here. This is semantic memory. Eric Jensen says that we have 4 different pathways, ways that we remember information. And school tends to focus really heavily on the semantic memory. Okay? It's the what information. Most everything is language-based, visual tends to be, or auditory. When I went to train with Eric Jensen, that was completely where my classroom was. And I thought I was being really successful. I was doing things in a lot of different ways to try and reach kids, a lot of multisensory stuff, I felt good about what I was doing. That's kind of why I went to see him, so that he could say how great I was. You know, I was wrong. He suggested that we work on other ways of memory, because memory is learning, right? Once you have something in your memory, you can use it, you can go back and get it. So one of the things we do as educators is try to create memories for kids, okay? He suggested that there are these other ways to get memories to stick. And that if we would in education use them more, kids would learn more. Okay? Let's talk about this one, episodic memory. When you think of the word episode, episodic, what comes to mind? TV, right? Right? The Seinfeld episode, right? 30-minute segment, right? And when we have an episodic memory, it's usually that you remember all the things about it. You remember where you were, how you were dressed, what someone said, even what the aromas were in the room. I put a birthday cake here because a lot of us have those kinds of memories associated with family celebrations. Okay?
Is to provide a space and a place that is open, inviting. One of the things that we are reading is Peter Bullock's book, Community, the Structure of Belonging, which I had them read a little bit for that. And he talks about 4 conversations that need to happen. The invitation, the possibility, the ownership conversation, the dissent conversation, actually there are 5 now, and the gifts conversation. I think my role is to provide the invitation, to facilitate the possibility questions, to do as much as I can to deflect ownership, because there's a tendency to want to make me the responsible one, but try to keep giving it back to them, and to help them begin to ask those questions about possibility and ownership. Possibility and giftedness. And then I think the dissent question is always difficult. I think we actually started that conversation in the classroom yesterday in talking about no wrong answers. Later, I will be introducing the concept of, well, there may be several right answers, but there are going to be better answers. That was said yesterday was community is invisible. The concept, it is certainly an abstract concept. And Brittany said something, well, it's sort of like the wind. You see its effects, but you can't see the wind. And James didn't want to bite too much on that one. But there is the same kind of thing, I think, in terms of community and how it has an impact on discussion. When people feel a connection, a common purpose, they feel safe with each other. And as an aside, I would say that people's sense of humor, their willingness to laugh together sometimes gives you a sense of laughter that isn't about taking you off topic, but helps you know that you are engaging with each other and enjoying each other, that kind of laughter. So I think learning happens at a deeper level, and we're more open. When we're defensive, we don't take things in. And community, I think, is a way to dissuade that defensiveness. I belong. I'm doing things with people who also belong.
My process is a lot like my designing any kind of a lesson process. I start with what are the key concepts and getting clarity on what key concepts I'm trying to get across. And then I look at the goals or the outcomes that I'm trying to have, that I want. And I write them down. And I think cognitively, as a result of going through this lesson. What do I want students to know? What do I want students to feel affectively? What do I want students to do behaviorally? Who do I want students to be? How am I trying to shape them existentially? So I come up with those kinds of goals and outcomes. And then I say, okay, if I have real clarity on the concepts and I'm going to do something experiential, or if I'm going to design a simulation, then what exactly am I simulating? And I get real clarity there. And then I say, okay, how can I set up this activity to be as isomorphic to the real thing? How can I make it parallel the real thing as much as possible? Because the situation is contrived in a simulation. But if we're going for real feelings, then you have to make it as close to the real thing as you can. Figure out how would you evaluate this lesson, just like you would have an evaluation for another kind of lesson. You know, somebody that's going to observe you doing the activity or the simulation or whatever. You know, what means, how are you going to evaluate what you did? And you have to consider that. And myself, I work best with other people, and I'm most creative with others. So I usually run my ideas by somebody or do it in conjunction with somebody. Not always, but a lot of times. So it's like, think about how do you best design and do what's most comfortable for you. One of the young ladies, she was so upset about how she was being treated. And she grabbed the door, and I'm like, where are you going? And she's like, I'm going to go tell the president on you. And in fact, I'm going to tell Jay Barnes, because my dad knows Jay Barnes, and we're going to tell him on you, and you're going to get fired. And she was so upset, and she ran out the door, and I had to send one of my helpers after her to stop her from running to Jay Barnes' office to tell on me and bring her back and calm her down. And she could not, she had to just observe. She couldn't watch the rest. But when we started the process, she started to get it. It started to click. And she, she wrote one of the best reflection papers, and she kept referring back to it the rest of the semester. And when she wrote her theology paper at the end of the semester, it referred back to lessons that she learned from the simulation and the other simulations that I did in class. And it was transformative for her.
So this will give you a little feel for what the videos are like. Like I said, they'll be released. Probably start releasing them in a couple weeks now. And what I'll be doing on C Faculty is putting a little blurb, what that particular video is about. And if it's a topic of interest to you, or perhaps it's a person of interest to you, a colleague or just somebody you're kind of intrigued with, encourage you to watch it. And there'll be a written piece that'll go along with it as well too. As I was going through this, there were some things that really struck me, and I'm still involved in the project too. But just a couple observations. The 13 faculty I worked with, uniformly, I just walked away with a feeling that these are folks that really care about their students, that are really invested in them, and that they care about their learning. Not just the teaching that they're doing, but the fact that somebody's actually learning. Just a lot of concern about that. And I would say in probably at least 8, 9, 10 of the conversations, faith integration came up, without a lot of prompting necessarily on my part too, but just a lot of conscious effort really going into that. I also noticed in all 13 of the people just a significant investment in the teaching process. These weren't folks that were grabbing some notes that they've had for 15 years and jumping up front and going with it. But I could see that there's literally hours, hundreds of hours that have gone into this whole teaching process. Each course that they have, just huge investments have gone into it. And I think, too, that these 13 people felt, to me, like really experienced teachers in many ways. I didn't get a sense that they were thinking, well, I might try this and kind of see how it goes. But each one of them really had put a lot of thought into what they were doing, why they were doing it, and they had belief in what they were doing. They knew that this was going to work, and they were going at it, with a lot of conviction. And obviously, all that comes from them at some point trying things and experimenting, but they knew what they were doing. Also notice that they just had, I think, a really good command of their content area. I think somebody that doesn't know their content when they're teaching, oftentimes they get so wrapped up in thinking, what am I going to say next, what am I going to do next, that they lose sight of the fact that there are students actually in front of them. And the folks that are featured in here, I think, knew their content so well that their cognitive energy could really go into the students that were there, thinking about them and what their questions might be, and were they tracking, not tracking. And the thing that really struck me, too, is that just the variety of ways that these faculty were seeking to engage their students. I chose to title, my series, Engage Teaching and Learning. And to a T, the 13 people engaged students, but they all did it in very, very different ways. But as an educator, I think a lot about teaching, obviously, and learning. And to me, that student engagement is really the key feature, and whether or not somebody's going to walk away, something significant that they've learned. And the thing that I was really pleased with, too, is just to see that folks were not concerned about learning of facts and figures and that type of thing, but these 13 faculty were really pushing hard, to take students beyond, just the normal surface understanding, and really getting them digging deeply, into whatever that content was, whatever thought processes were involved in it too. And I was really impressed with it. I'm somebody who has a daughter who goes to school here at Bethel, and I walked away thinking, man, my daughter is in good hands, with the kind of faculty that we have here. And I've walked away from these interviews and this whole process just feeling pretty inspired, by the quality of education that we've got going on at Bethel. We're going to play a little, I guess I'm going to call it a little game here now. And I'm going to call it Who Said That is what we're going to call this. And what I did was I pulled a number of quotes from the different videos. And there's one that comes from each of the participants that we have. And you're going to need to figure out who said that. And sometimes it's going to be very easy to figure out who said that. But just bear with me on this. As we go through the quotes that are here, what I'd like you to do is think about a quote that you would like to say something about at some point. We're going to finish off with a little bit of interaction here. So we're trying to guess who said it, but I also want you to think of a quote that's really kind of striking you, in some way. Okay? And let's do this in a highly scientific way here too. In other words, you just yell out the name. You know who it is. Okay? All right. So even in churches, you don't tend to get this idea of integrated secular knowledge. I'm not going to read the whole thing. You can read it. Okay. Who are you gonna put this one on? Chris. That would be Chris. Okay. Faith integration. Yep. Second one. Spend a lot of time thinking about setting. Not only the physical environment, but the psychological environment. I'm thinking about, is this a safe place to learn?
Lisa.
Yep, that's going to be Lisa. She titled hers Manipulating Classroom Environment. That sounds like, boy, just a devious thing, doesn't it? But it's a really, she uses it in a very positive sense. Okay, how about this one? This is going to be somebody you probably don't know, but it's somebody that actually is in the room here. Teaching partner. In today's world, there are so many ideas competing for the attention and minds of our students. I believe...
Bud Becker.
Yep, going to be Bud Becker. This is Bud actually over here.
Who I do know.
Yeah.
Years ago, by the way.
How about this one? What we hope for in an immersion experience, okay, we've now given that away, is that students will have emic glimpses, into other cultures. Okay, what do you think here?
Karen.
Yep, Karen Drake, Dave Mahavich. Yep, study abroad. Okay, Marion Diamond, Pat Wolf, Eric Jensen all talk about episodic memory. It's all about having experiences that tap into prior learning.
Lisa.
No, not Lisa. You'd think it was. This is actually Jill. Okay, Jill Martin, active engagement of learners. Yep. Okay, backside. Professors must first of all model it. Next sentence, we've given it away. Okay, that's going to be Ruben. I view lecturing as an art form, not so much a performance. Okay, it's a discrete number. Okay, it's going to be Wayne. That was a tough one. That was tough.
What's the word art?
All right, how about this one? A little trickier. We try to design for engagement. What we know about an online environment is that if you engage, okay, you're going to be John Grubner. If you've never met John, just an amazing guy. Great video to listen to. How about this one? The traditional approach, educational approach, is set up for logical, mathematical, verbal, linguistic types of learning. There are other kinds of intelligences. I think that students may learn best by, what do you think here?
Patty?
Not Patty. It could be, but it's not.
Kara?
Yeah, Karen McKinney, experiential learning. Yeah. Okay, how about this? A healthy classroom community is one where people are excited to come, feel connected to other people in the class. Okay, Catherine Nevins, community building. How about the next one? When adult learners engage in a topic. Okay, going to be Mark Thorson. Okay, and then our last one. Every one of those brains in the classroom is constructing their own knowledge. What's happening? Yep, just read through the rest of it. Yep, it's Patty, inquiry-based learning. So you're going to have to do something here. Okay? We're going to, it's what you get with an active learning guy, so there's just no way out of it here. I'm going to do an activity that I call Save the Last Word for Me. So the way this is going to work is I'd like you to pick one of the quotes that's here. Okay? So pick one of the quotes that's there. One that kind of grabbed you, as you were reading through it. Then I'd like you to think about something you'd like to say, about that quote, a way of extending it, examples, whatever, just something you would like to say about that quote. And then just around you, why don't you get in groups of 3 or 4, and then you're going to read your group, you're going to read your quote to that group, and then each person in the group is going to say something about the quote. And it might be really profound, maybe it's not really profound, but you have to hear what they have to say first, and then you're going to throw in your comments at that point. So you have to save your last word until they've had some thoughts about it. We're going to finish this off. It's about 5 to 11 roughly now. So if you need to leave at 11, that's great. Otherwise, just kind of stick with your group if you could. And I'm just going to finish off with the idea of to be really watching for the videos coming up. Today was just a glimpse. It was just kind of an overview of the project. But I think you're really going to enjoy watching each person and really kind of hearing the depth of what they have to say. My premise in this project, like I said, is we have so much to learn from one another. Another part of that thinking is that we don't really have the time, to go and sit down with another teacher, another prof here, and just talk about it. What are you doing in your role? How's it working? Why are you doing it? We don't have time to go and sit in other people's classrooms and just watch what they're doing for the most part. Teaching in many ways is it's a pretty isolated profession that we're in. We prepare, we go do our thing, we come back, prepare, do our thing. So a lot of the premise is that we have so much to learn from one another, and we just need that time to sit down and just listen and just actually watch somebody, in action. And that's what I think the film series will help you do a bit too.
Jay, can I say something real quick? I don't know what the plans are for fall retreat, but with the Debs and Kathy's in the room, I think this would be a fabulous way to structure fall retreat around your work, but also just thinking about how we and our colleagues teach.
Mm-hmm. The one thing that is going to be coming that actually just kind of finalized today, there's going to be there's a Talk About Teaching series, and there are about 6 more of these sessions that are going to come. And the presenters at these upcoming sessions are going to be faculty that were featured in this series. And what I've done is I've tried to pair people that have similar areas of expertise in their teaching. For example, we've got Ruben on culturally responsive instruction paired up with Karen McKinney on experiential learning, paired up with Dave Mahavich and Karen Drake on study abroad. So they're going to be just talking about some of the connections they see between the interests they have and some of the strategies they use in the classroom. And that's really going to form about 5 or 6 of the next Talk About Teaching workshops that come up. So I'm going to try to release the films just before those Talk About Teaching segments come. So if there's a chance for you to see the film, before that conversation, I think that would be helpful as well too. But thanks for the suggestion.
Did you say at the beginning where all of these are going to be kept?
They're going to be on the on Bethel's website,
Yeah.
and when you look at the See Faculty message, there'll be a link. You just click right on it. It's going to take you right to it. But it's in the faculty development part of the Bethel website.
There's a new section under that that's called Virtual Center for Teaching and Learning.
Oh, okay.
So that's where they'll be.
Yeah, Virtual Center for Teaching and Learning. That's what it's called.